Good afternoon. I'm Zanelle October, Executive Vice President here at ACS, and I am pleased to welcome you and introduce today's speakers. The ACS Bay Area, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Sacramento Lawyer Chapters are pleased to present today's important and timely webinar, Serving the Public Interest, the Role of State Attorneys General in Protecting Election Integrity. ACS is the nation's largest progressive legal network. ACS believes that the Constitution is of the people, by the people, and for the people. ACS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. As such, it does not support political parties or candidates for public office. Election Day is just 32 days away, and voters across the country have already started voting early and submitting their ballots by mail. To say that the 2020 election, in the middle of a climate emergency, an historic pandemic, an economic recession, and a reckoning on race is unprecedented is an understatement. This election is also happening at a time when we are still mourning the loss of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg's passing and a rightward shift of the Supreme Court could have a devastating impact on voting rights, among the many rights that will be shaped by the court. ACS is honored to host the Attorneys General of two pivotal states, California and Pennsylvania, to discuss the actions they're taking to protect the integrity of the election in their respective states this November. First, the Honorable Javier Becerra has served as the 33rd Attorney General of the state of California since January 2017. He is the first Latino to hold that office. The state's chief law enforcement officer, Attorney Becerra, has decades of experience serving the people of California through appointed and elected office. Attorney General Becerra previously served 12 terms in Congress as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Prior to serving in Congress, Attorney General Becerra served in the California legislature and was a Deputy Attorney General with the California Department of Justice. The Attorney General began his legal career in 1984 working in a legal services office representing people with mental illness. Born in Sacramento, California, Attorney General Becerra is the son of working-class parents and was the first in his family to receive a 4-year degree, earning his Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Stanford University. He earned his Juris Doctorate from Stanford Law School. Next, we have the Honorable Josh Shapiro, who serves as Pennsylvania's Attorney General. He is the 6th person elected to the office and has served as the Commonwealth's top lawyer and chief law enforcement officer since January 2017. Attorney General Shapiro's career as a public servant includes experience serving in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and as chairman of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners. In 2015, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf named Shapiro as the chairman of the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. Attorney General Shapiro graduated magna cum laude from the University of Rochester and earned his law degree at night from Georgetown University Law Center. I will now pass the mic over to my colleague, Director of Network Advancement, Valerie Nannery, who will be moderating today's conversation. Valerie oversees our State Attorneys General project at ACS. Take it away, Valerie.
Thank you, Zanelle. Just a few notes before we get started. Please note that today's event is being recorded and the recording will be available on our website at acslaw.org. If you would like to ask a question about the State Attorneys General role in election integrity, just click on the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen and type your question into the Q&A box at any time. We will try to get to as many questions as we can. If you are a member of the media, please include your outlet with your question, and please do not post your question in the chat because we may not see it. Now, on to this important conversation. Attorney General Becerra, why don't you get us started by speaking to this moment and the importance of safeguarding free and fair elections?
Valerie, absolutely. To you, to ACS, and to my dear friend and colleague, Josh Shapiro, thank you for having us. Right time, right place to discuss this. why don't we just do this? Why don't we just agree on something? Democracy is not ready-made. Democracy is not to be taken for granted. Democracy exists only so long as we choose to let it exist. Democracy is an idea, and only when you put it to life does it have vigor, can it have vitality. And I don't know if we can think of a time in our, at least our lifetimes, when the idea as well as the actual operation of democracy has been put more in jeopardy. But that's why it's also important to remember what has made our democracy so strong. We think of the Constitution, we think of the American flag, we think of the Statue of Liberty. Piece of paper, piece of cloth, and copper. At the end of the day, though, those three things have meant the world for everyone, not just in America, but really for the world. And those notions of what democracy can be, represented by a piece of paper, a piece of cloth, and by copper, have become what drives so much of what we do today, and what makes so many people strive to make it to America's shores. And so today's discussion, I hope, will concentrate on supporting, not suppressing, the vote. And I can certainly tell you that I know that Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General in Pennsylvania, is working overtime to make sure that his state is supporting, not suppressing, the vote. And I can guarantee you that in the state with the largest number of voters, we're at nearly 21 million registered voters in our state. We will have the largest turnout likely in our history, which means the largest turnout in American history of any state having its population vote. We're going to do everything to encourage voting, including allowing people to vote up to election day by mail and getting their ballots in at least 17 days after the election. And so we're going to do everything we can. I know Josh will do everything he can. And I know you all at ACS are doing everything you can to guarantee not just our democracy, but the vote.
Thank you so much, General Becerra. Attorney General Shapiro, with all the praise from your colleague across the country in California, we would love to hear an update about the litigation against the United States Postal Service. If you could start by giving us just a quick refresh our memory about what happened that led us to this point and what has happened since.
Well, Valerie, thank you. It's great to be with you, and it's awesome to be with my colleague, Javier. He is not only in the most populous state and an incredibly important state, he is someone that all of us look to across the country and lead from. And Valerie, let me just ask, are you able to hear me okay? Am I coming through? Okay, terrific, thank you. We all look to Javier. He and his very capable team provide tremendous resources and support. And I appreciate his friendship and his guide as a colleague. And of course, to ACS, thank you for all that you do every day in order to make sure that the rule of law is protected and ensured for all Americans, no matter what you look like or where you come from, who you love or who you pray to or choose not to pray to. You know, Javier and I have been in court many times together to defend the rule of law. I don't know that either of us expected that we would be going to court against the federal government as much as we've had to in order to protect the rule of law. But that's what we've done for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, for dreamers, for our planet, for so many other things. And now we're in court, quite literally having to defend the right to vote in this country, something that we and our ancestors fought so hard for to make sure that people could vote. Here in Pennsylvania, we're battling it on many fronts. We have the President of the United States who's literally sued us to undermine our vote by mail statute. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. At the federal level, we've seen the President's hand-picked Postmaster General take illegal steps to slow down the mail, make it harder for veterans here in my state and other states to get their prescriptions, make it harder for small businesses to operate because the mail's simply not getting there on time, and ultimately put at risk our election mail in this country. And so when Javier and I and our teams saw this happening, we jumped into action. Together, along with a few other states, North Carolina, Massachusetts, a few others that come to mind, we sued in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. For those of you not as familiar with the terrain, that's where the city of Philadelphia is. We sued in federal court saying that the changes that Postmaster General DeJoy made were illegal. Why were they illegal? Because they were concrete operational changes that slowed the mail, that impacted service and delivery times. And because of the changes the types of changes that were made, those changes were required to go through something called the Postal Regulatory Commission for approval, a step that Louis DeJoy never took. So here you have a step that was taken illegally. It negatively impacted the flow of mail. And so Javier and I went to court, and just a few days ago won an injunction from the federal judge there, which in effect requires the Postal Service to roll back the illegal changes that they made to their operations, and in theory, get the mail flowing on time again, not only alleviating the burden on our veterans and small businesses and others, but giving the American people confidence that their ballot that they're sending through the mail will arrive on time, because after all, election mail has always been prioritized. Take a day or two or three to get there, not the 4, 5, or 6 as estimated, given the changes that were made by DeJoy. With that injunction in place, we're seeing some positive changes. We're also seeing reports out of Philadelphia just yesterday that the mail changes, the rollbacks, if you will, have not occurred yet. And so we're back in court, making sure the judge is aware of this. And one of the things that I'm seeking is an independent, one of the things we're seeking, I should say, is an independent monitor to ensure that the changes that have been ordered by this judge are in fact made, and that we can have confidence in the operations of the Postal Service again. So that's an update on that case. There's many other cases that we're battling out every single day in both federal court and state court here in Pennsylvania. And I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to get into that during the discussion. So I look forward to it. Thanks, Valerie.
Thank you, General Shapiro. We definitely will turn to that other election litigation. I do want to ask you a few questions about the injunction in this case and what the next steps are. This is the 4th nationwide injunction issued by federal courts over the changes at the Postal Service. Can you give us details about what you sought in terms of the rollbacks? Did that actually include equipment being put back? And whether, what is covered by the injunction in your case, as well as what is covered by other injunctions that maybe is not covered in your injunction that also implicates voters across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say our colleagues, General Ferguson in Washington, General James in New York, also had success in court when it came to holding the Postal Service accountable. And we appreciate their leadership as well. Valerie, you made reference, I believe, to machinery, I think you were referring to. And there was a lot on cable TV about those machines that were being thrown out the back door, or the boxes that were being removed from a street corner. And look, that's concerning, but I think there's also routine changes and maintenance that happens all the time that maybe in the past wouldn't have caught our attention. It catches our attention now, of course, because we have a president who can't tell the truth, and enablers like Louis DeJoy who do things underhanded in ways that undermine our democracy. And so, of course, our attention went up when we saw those images. But the crux of Javier and my suit is less about the boxes and the machinery and much more about these operational changes. Let me give you a specific to explain it. It used to be that a postal worker would arrive at her or his set time of the day. They would fully load up the mail truck with all the mail. They would deliver it all to all the different homes or apartments or whatever along their route, and then they would return once that was done. Under the changes that DeJoy made in July, they were requiring postal workers to go out at a set time, whether the truck was fully loaded or not, and return at a set time, whether the truck was fully emptied or not, meaning, having done all of the different, the different drop-off points. As a result of that, mail was delayed, sometimes weeks in my state, and I know in other states as well. And so by rolling back those changes that were made in July, we'll go back to the way it used to be. Fully load the truck, fully deliver the mail, and basically let the postal workers do the good job that they've been doing for decades. Re-empower the postal workers and not let Louis DeJoy get away with what he was doing, which is making illegal operational changes that slowed down the mail and threatened our ballots in this election.
So this question is for either of you. Are you confident that the injunctions will protect votes cast by mail this year?
Josh, okay, I'll go ahead and start. And Valerie, it's as I was saying before, the law is nothing but this notion that often is codified in books. If someone is intent on not following the law, the only action we can take is to try to enforce against those who don't comply. And so really we're left hoping that people who have positions of authority and responsibility will comply with the law. But if they don't, we can only try to go after them and enforce. That may be too late after November the 3rd if we have a whole bunch of folks who just follow the law. And that's why it's so important for us to take these actions early, to make it clear what the law is, so that the Postal Service and Postmaster General DeJoy don't get any misimpressions about what their obligations are. But can we guarantee that every county registrar, that every precinct operator, every state secretary of state for each state will do what they're required to? No, we just have to hope that people's conscience and belief in that piece of paper, in that piece of cloth, and in that piece of metal we call the Statue of Liberty, believe that we need to keep it going. And the only way to do that is for every one of us to believe that those notions of democracy will exist in our franchise, in the vote. And so it's up to us. And that's why we have to hope that we can hold people accountable, including the President of the United States.
Thank you so much, General Becerra. Before we move on to the next topic, I just wanted to ask what comes next in the litigation. Is the Postal Service going to appeal this decision? General Shapiro?
We have been working directly with Judge McHugh in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania to bring to his attention some of the reports we're seeing from not just here in Pennsylvania, but around the country, where those operational changes were not yet rolled back. And, discussing what the next steps are going to be to make sure that the judge's order is upheld. Bottom line here is we need to have independent verification that the operational changes were rolled back. And I have confidence in Judge McHugh that process will occur.
Thank you so much. General Shapiro, apart from the USPS litigation, both you and General Becerra have been involved in pre-election litigation about voting from home during a pandemic and how ballots are submitted to election officials. Can you tell us more about some of the challenges Pennsylvania has faced? You hinted at them earlier in this discussion, but the challenges you've faced in ensuring that people are able to vote safely in a pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give a brief background for those who are not from Pennsylvania, not as familiar with our laws and not as familiar with our elections. So obviously we're a big state. We're a battleground state, as people refer to us as. And back in 2016, there were about 6 million people who voted in the presidential election. I'm not going to get into political punditry as to whether it'll be that number this time or more, but let's just kind of work with that 6 million figure, because I think it'll help elucidate my broader point about how people are going to vote. In that last election in 2016, nearly everyone voted on election day, or they voted with an absentee ballot. In 2019, the legislature and the governor got together and passed our vote by mail statute, something that existed in California for some time and has existed across the country for decades. But our vote by mail statute is relatively new. Here you have to request a vote by mail ballot. And estimates suggest, based on the preliminary data and based on trends, that about 3 million Pennsylvania voters will request a vote by mail ballot. So that's, 3 million of 6 million. I'm not very good at math, but that's about half if I did my math right. And so that's sort of the makeup of the electorate and how people are going to vote. Now, we have faced a barrage of lawsuits from Donald Trump's campaign and the efforts of his enablers to literally try and undermine our vote by mail statute in Pennsylvania. A statute, by the way, I should point out, that was passed with more Republican votes a year and a half ago than Democratic votes. And I always believe that while elections are partisan exercises, right? You're choosing the Democrat, the Republican, you're choosing, this candidate over that candidate because of your views, your ideology, whatever. The operations of an election should not be partisan at all. They should be nonpartisan. Yet the president continually tries to inject partisanship into it and is sued to undermine our law. He is sued to not allow voters, for example, to put their ballots in drop boxes. He is sued to make it harder for your vote by mail ballot to count. He's actually sued to allow poll watchers to come in from outside of your local county in order to monitor the election. And let's be real what that's all about. That's about bringing people into Black and brown communities and intimidating them when they go to the polls. Let's be very real about what that is. So there's been a litany of litigation that's come from the president. Good news is we're winning. We've won in federal court. We've won in our state Supreme Court. Now, some of his Republican enablers are trying to get the U.S. Supreme Court to take this up. We'll see what happens there. But consistently, the president has alleged all kinds of fraud, all kinds of nonsense that goes on here in Pennsylvania, and never once in court has he been able to back up his ridiculous tweets and his lies on cable TV. And so we're just methodically, one step at a time, beating him in court, demonstrating to the public what the facts are, what the evidence is, what the law actually suggests, or what the law actually does, I should say, and trying to give the people of Pennsylvania confidence in the process while the president and his enablers do their best to try and undermine it. So I feel good about where things are. I wish I didn't have to battle the president in court over the right to vote, but we are, and we're winning. We're going to do everything we can to protect the right to vote for all Pennsylvanians, whether they vote by mail or they vote in person on November 3rd.
Thank you, General Shapiro. General Becerra, has California faced similar challenges, pre-election voting challenges?
Valerie, we have, and fortunately, we as well have been successful. We've defeated every effort to undermine our governor's executive orders and now some of our statutes, because some of these executive orders have actually been codified into law. And so far, we've been able to protect the orders which essentially try to protect Californians who wish to vote. And if even the most guarded person in the world can contract the COVID-19 virus, then every American will be at risk. And we have to do everything we can to protect them. And so it should surprise no one that in the state of California, every single registered voter will now receive a ballot in the mail. And they will have any number of ways to submit that ballot, whether by mail, by walking it in to the registrar's office, or to assigned locations, or by voting on election day, as we're traditionally accustomed to doing so. I should mention that about 50 years ago, about 3% of Californians voted by mail in our general election. In the primary that happened this year, more than 72% of Californians voted by mail. And we expect that number will either hit or exceed that 72% voting by mail. And so it's been done for decades. It's been done by Republicans and Democrats. And it's the way we should be able to do it. And we'll protect everyone's right to vote how they wish.
This question is for both of you. Do you anticipate that these legal challenges to your local voting laws in your states will be settled before Election Day? We are just a little over a month away.
Well, I can tell you in my office, we've set ourselves up effectively into 3 teams. A team that is focused on all of these voting issues leading up to 6:59 a.m. on Election Day. A team that's focused on 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Election Day while the polls are open. And then a team that, and I hope we never have to use this team, but a team that is going to be focused on any attempts by the president or anyone else for that matter to try and undermine the counting of all legal eligible votes, kind of 8:01 p.m. on. We're very prepared. We're spending a lot of time on this. And we view this as fundamental to our work as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer and Chief Legal Officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to ensure that every single vote counts, regardless of who your preferred candidate is.
I'd say in California as well, we are prepared. We have a team that's ready to go on Election Day, and that's been the case for years that the AG's office has been prepared to work with the Secretary of State in California. We've been doing a number of things leading up to the election in California, and working with AG Shapiro and a number of our colleagues, we've actually taken actions to support the efforts throughout the country, whether it was in Texas, trying to make sure that if the counties wanted to provide absentee ballots, that they had a right to do so, or trying to make sure that in a place like Texas, that there is at least more than one drop box per county in the state's various counties. And so we're doing what we can to support the various efforts that are underway. We believe while the actual litigation may not be totally settled by Election Day, we think it'll be a settled fact that a lot of Californians will vote and that their votes will get counted.
General Becerra, can you explain for our more than 200 participants in this event today what role state attorneys general in California and Pennsylvania have in ensuring the certified election results?
So in so many ways, the attorneys general throughout the country have served as a backstop for democracy and the rule of law, especially as Josh has mentioned, in our efforts to stop the federal government from violating the law. And at the same time, we've also been the tip of the spear, quite honestly, in advancing ways to protect people's rights without waiting for someone else to do it. So when it comes to this issue of the elections and the vote, we've taken a number of measures to make sure that we are supporting those in our state who have actual jurisdiction over the vote, the Secretary of State, the county registrars, and we're providing information to Americans who wish to vote. And so we're making it very clear that if you're 16 or 17 in California, you can actually register. You won't be able to vote till you're 18. But if you're going to be 18 by Election Day, then hey, you can register now. And we're going to make it clear to Californians that if you forgot to mail that ballot in and it's now a day before the election, you can still mail it in. Just make sure it's postmarked by Election Day. And so long as it's received within 17 days of November 3rd, it will count. So we're doing a number of things to protect the vote and encouraging folks to get out there and vote.
Along those lines, can ACS members play a role in the post-election process, whether that's as a volunteer helping to ensure an accurate count or speaking within their networks? What would you encourage our members to do?
Josh, let me go ahead and let you go since I went on the last.
Yeah, look, I can tell you we have gotten so much outreach from attorneys, ACS members, and otherwise in Pennsylvania offering to help, which I'm so grateful for. And I would say there's kind of two buckets, if you will, of opportunities to help. One is on the purely political side. If people want to be an advocate for a particular candidate on Election Day, being able to be there for them and support them. And the second is assisting attorneys general like myself, Javier, and others with the work we need to do, whether it's research, draft and briefs, looking at interesting and unique questions of law that could be raised throughout this time. And I think there's an opportunity for your members to do both. I think really the question, they're both incredibly important. Even something as simple as working at your poll so that we can open up enough polls to allow people the opportunity to vote in person if they so choose. All of that is going to be important. And I think each of your members who has clearly demonstrated a desire to be part of a broader good in the world, right? Just they're concerned about what happens outside the walls of their law offices, which we appreciate and admire. There's a role for them to play. And I want to encourage you to think about, whether you want to do something for a candidate, whether you want to partner with one of our offices on a pro bono basis to assist in things. I think there's great opportunities there in both buckets. Javier?
Yeah, Valerie, I'll just add a couple of things. First, because I agree, especially on the pro bono side, those who are attorneys who want to be helpful, really crucial that you report into organizations that are providing legal assistance to those who are doing poll watching and so forth. I'll set two other things. Let's encourage people to vote. We've got family and friends. We all know someone who's saying, I don't have time. Let's just get people to vote. Let's give them confidence that their vote will count. I know that I'm asking all my friends in Pennsylvania to go vote because it's a battleground. California, pretty much foregone conclusion where things are going to end up. But we've got some important initiatives and so forth, down ballot races. Vote. Just go out and vote. And then the final thing I'll say is, gosh, it's like the sign you see out in the airports. If you see something, say something. Let us know. If you're seeing something that doesn't look right around the elections, say something. Let us know, and then let us take a look and investigate and find out if it's being done right or not.
Thank you so much. We have questions coming in from our participants, and we thank you all for submitting your questions. 2020 will be the first presidential election in 4 decades where the Republican Party will not be subject to a consent decree that required judicial review of any so-called ballot security programs. And General Shapiro, you discussed this a little bit earlier when you were talking about litigation in Pennsylvania. We've already seen anecdotal reports of voter intimidation at polling locations in Virginia. How are your offices preparing for this new dynamic?
We are quite worried about it. And it is clear from the lawyers who work on the Trump campaign, and this isn't my opinion, they've bragged about this, that they're going to do what they need to do in order to affect the outcome of this election by doing certain things on election day. They've celebrated the end of that consent decree, Valerie, that you referenced. They've spoken openly about how that gives them new tools in this election to affect the outcome. That's pretty distressing if you stop and think about it, that they're celebrating the idea that we can intimidate people at the polls. We're dealing with this very specifically in Pennsylvania, where the president and his enablers are suing to allow out-of-county poll workers to come in and watch what happens. And I spoke about this, Valerie, earlier, because I want to just state this in like as plain as terms as I possibly can. This is about bringing people into Black and brown communities, primarily in places like Philadelphia and Allentown and Pittsburgh, in order to intimidate certain voters. And I'm not going to allow that. I'm not. That's why we're in court battling this out and winning to ensure that that change in our laws doesn't come, and that these poll watchers can't be brought in from out of county to threaten voters that may look different from them. I am very concerned about that. I'm working with my law enforcement colleagues to prepare for Election Day, as I talked about before. We'll be ready in Pennsylvania, but we're going to have a lot more battles on our hands with the Trump campaign and what they're up to leading up to that day to ensure that that type of intimidation doesn't occur.
General Becerra, do you have any comments on that issue?
Yeah, I'll just add that it's very disappointing that Congress has failed to re-up the Voting Rights Act the way it was. John Lewis was one of the champions for that, Congressman John Lewis, civil rights champion John Lewis, who just passed this year. The legislation to restore the Voting Rights Act to its preeminence where it was before, where it was gutted, now takes its name from him. And it's clear we still need to do something. In California, it's been a while since we've seen egregious cases of voting rights violations on Election Day, but we've had situations where so-called security guards have been posted at polling stations, at precincts, to try to intimidate mostly new voters, minority voters who are coming in to vote. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that people feel not only safe, but enthusiastic about coming to vote. And so we're making it very clear that President's statements about sending law enforcement to stand watch at polling stations, that's ridiculous. We'll make sure that that doesn't happen in California. It's against the law to do those types of things. But it's one of those things where we have to do much more. And passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act would be one of the very first things we should do in this next Congress.
We're
I
getting.
just want to pick
go
up
on.
on one thing Javier said, because I think you're going to begin to hear more about this in the president's rhetoric. The notion of putting law enforcement at the polls, in his mind, is a way to intimidate certain voters. That is completely unlawful here in Pennsylvania. And as you just heard from Javier, it's unlawful in California under our state laws, and it's unlawful under various federal laws. And I think it is important, as we've seen just in Pennsylvania in the last week, the president threatens things, he lies about what's happening here, and he creates a lot of noise. But at the end of the day, he doesn't get to unilaterally rewrite the law. And that is something that Javier and I enforce, and I won't hesitate to enforce that against the president in order to protect people's access to the ballot box.
So a question from one of our participants, I think you touched on this a little bit, is if a person seeking to vote in person is feeling harassed at the polls, like what should they do?
Well, I said earlier, if you see something, say something. And I hope that anyone who sees individuals who are somehow posted around the precincts where people are voting and seeming to harass, please report it. As both Josh and I have mentioned, we're all going to have teams on the ground ready to respond. We know organizations and volunteers who understand the process are going to be ready to respond. So you're not going to be alone. At least in California, we're going to do everything, as I said, to make you feel enthusiastic about casting that vote, especially if you're a first-time voter because you just turned 18 or you just became a U.S. citizen. We want this to be a great experience because we want you to continue to do it.
Well, we are getting very close to time. I would like to ask one more question about disinformation. As the pandemic has continued for more than 6 months and people are even more reliant on the internet for information, are you worried about disinformation campaigns, including in non-English speaking communities? And can you speak to any actions your office has taken against disinformation?
Josh, I'll let you go first.
Of course, we're worried about it, and I'm worried about it in non-English speaking communities. I'm worried about it in all of our communities. But what we have actually experienced in Pennsylvania over the last six or 7 days is that disinformation campaign is, I hate to say it, being led by the President of the United States. Let me give you two very concrete examples that elucidate my point. You may have seen this on the national news about a week or so ago. The president went on the air, and his spokeswoman went on the air and said that Donald Trump ballots were being thrown in dumpsters in a place called Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. That's where Wilkes-Barre is, if anyone's familiar with northeastern Pennsylvania. He went and made these reckless statements and suggested that it was a result of purposeful, fraud, while law enforcement was investigating what occurred. By less than 24 hours later, what we learned was there was a clerical error made by a seasonal employee who was immediately fired. The county officials reported it to law enforcement, and law enforcement determined that there was nothing nefarious that went on. And those less than 10 individuals whose ballots could have possibly been impacted now have recourse through the local county board of elections. You see, 24 hours went by and we got the facts, and it was not the facts that met the president's narrative of fraud. Just a couple days later, the president went on the debate stage that millions of Americans watched, and some of you remember this line. He said, "Bad things are happening in Philadelphia." Right, Javier? You saw him say that. Well, you know what the bad things were? That he wasn't afforded the opportunity to have a poll watcher go into one of our early voting centers. You know why? Because the law in Pennsylvania doesn't allow any candidate to have a poll watcher go into an early voting center. Neither Democrats nor Republicans. And his people were informed of that. But yet again, he went out and offered misinformation to try and create this narrative that fraud exists and that the election results can't be trusted. And I think he's saying that for two reasons. Number one, he sees the direction a lot of these votes are going, and they're not going in his favor. And number two, he's trying to make voters feel powerless, to make voters feel like their vote might not count, that they don't have a stake in the future of our democracy. When in reality, every single legal eligible American gets one vote, including the President of the United States, only one. The people are the ones with the power. And I'm not going to let the president, through his purposeful misinformation campaign, take away the power of the people and undermine the vote. So we're going to keep beating him in court. We're going to keep beating him in the court of public opinion by simply pointing out what's true, what's fact, and what's the law. And I believe that the people of Pennsylvania are seeing through this nonsense, and they're going to go vote. They're going to go vote probably in record numbers. And I think at the end of the day, it will change the course of our country for the good.
Valerie, I'll just add that, let me just ask each and every one of you, and tell all your friends who are voting and relatives, get into your best Zen state, and then just close out all that noise, all that, the lies and the intimidation. Don't worry. Just if you know what it takes to vote, whether at home, which means you can really close out the noise, if you're going to go to the poll, you just be confident, have that warrior walk as you get into the polls, and just cast your ballot. This is an important process, and that piece of paper, that cloth, and that statue protect your right to vote, and go in with the confidence that you're going to vote, and it makes no difference what someone wants to do to intimidate you. It's going on. We know the disinformation is going to be out there, but we can combat that really easily if we just act like Democrats, little d, and if you want to act like a Democrat, big D, good for you as well. But just go out there and vote, and shut out the noise.
I think that you may have answered my next question, General Becerra, which was, what is the most important message you want to send to ACS members today about this year's election? And I know your time is very limited, and you may have to jump off with your final notes. Yeah, that's my final question to you, General Becerra.
So, Valerie, I would say that it's not just the vote; it's having that freedom to vote. My parents used to tell me stories when they were young adults. My dad couldn't walk into restaurants and establishments because of the signs that said "No dogs, Negroes, or Mexicans allowed." There are a lot of reasons why we should have fear. One of them should not be because we have a right to vote, and the act of voting should be something we do not just with pride, but as I said, like a warrior. No one takes this from me. This is my franchise. And I would say, just as we have to complete the census process and get people to participate and fill out their census forms, because that's so important, the vote, the same thing. If we believe, if many of our fathers and mothers came to this country because they wanted what that piece of paper and that cloth and that statue provide, then we got to fight for it. And I would simply say, you go in there like a warrior to vote, and have the confidence that you can do it, because guess what? We've got your back. Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, a whole bunch of folks here in California, we're going to have your back, because we know that you may never have better opportunities to change this country and this world than by your vote. And so it is power. We're going to keep it in your hands. Just vote. Feel confident.
Thank you, General Becerra. General Shapiro, what's your most important message?
I don't know how I top that. So
Right.
I'm going to let that stand and just say to everybody on this call, make your plan to vote, and recognize not just the power you have with your singular vote, but I would also encourage you to recognize the power you have as trusted people in your community, trusted people that lead your law firms, that your colleagues look to for information and analysis. Help us beat back the misinformation and the lies coming from the president, and do everything you can to be engaged in our democracy. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being with us for this important and timely conversation. I know that you are both incredibly busy public officials, and we thank you for your time. Just a reminder, ACS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It does not support political parties or candidates for public office. For all of our participants in today's event, if you want to learn more about state attorneys general and their work, please go to acslaw.org/stateag for more information about how you can volunteer for nonpartisan activities this election year to help make sure that we have a free, fair, and safe election for all voters. Please go to acslaw.org and click on Get Involved to see volunteer opportunities. I will also drop a link in our chat that lets you link directly to those volunteer opportunities. As a reminder, California MCLE is available for this event, and CLE forms are attached to the calendar reminder you received this morning. And for Pennsylvania folks on the call who want CLE in the state of Pennsylvania, please email Chris Lynn at CLIN@acslaw.org to obtain CLE credit. A recording of this conversation will be posted at acslaw.org. Finally, as AG Shapiro and AG Becerra have emphasized, if you have not already done so, remember to check your voter registration and to make sure that it is up to date. Make a plan to vote. And once you've done that, make sure your friends and family have done so too. And while you're at it, do the same for the 2020 census. As with voting, we should all be counted. We thank you for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.